Hi Year 4 and welcome to your writing task for this week. So you will know by now that we are time travellers and we have travelled back in time to watch the terrible destruction of Pompeii. We're going to write a description of the eruption of Mount Vesuvius as our first task as time travellers. I've got an example here for you, and this is part of the text that Mrs. D did with you yesterday as your Read as a Reader from the book Escape from Pompeii. What I've done is changed it slightly and added some different openers and a bit more description to make it a bit more interesting. So I'm going to read it to you first, and then we're going to pick it apart a little bit and look at some of the things that you can do to make your piece of writing successful. Then, in one terrible, endless moment, mighty Mount Vesuvius roared. Boom! Suddenly, its top exploded in a scream, and angry scarlet flames ripped upwards to the sky. High above, a massive swirling cloud of silver ash rose to the heavens. It twisted and bubbled in every direction until everything was in total darkness, leaving an acrid stench lingering in the air, burning our nostrils. From nowhere, dazzling, jagged lightning flashed and thunder howled. Moments later, streams of molten liquid flowed in fast, swollen rivers down the mountain slopes and covered a nearby town. Within seconds, the walls, streets, and gardens of the beloved Pompeii disappeared beneath a heavy blanket of ash and stones. Before our very eyes, everything and everyone was destroyed. Survivors held each other desperately as they watched in horror as the steaming lava reached the sea itself. Forcefully, the water began to swell against the sides of the boats as they moved slowly out to safety. Soon, the sea sank back from the shore, and even the fishes were stranded there. Okay, so what we're going to have a look at now is a success criteria that you can use to help you create a really good descriptive piece of writing. So, what we're going to look out for are adverbs of time, because they help to move the action on. Whenever you write a descriptive piece of writing, you want to keep that action going. So the example that I've got here is moments later. Moments later, streams of molten liquid flowed in fast rivers down the mountain slopes and covered a nearby town. Another thing that I'd like you to try and use are adverbs of place to open sentences to say where things are happening. So the example I've got here is high above, and that's talking about the ash and the steam coming out of the volcano. A short sentence to show action is always good, and when you've got a volcano erupting, you can easily use a single word there with an exclamation mark to help the reader really understand how descriptive that sound is. I'd like you to use, of course, some expanded noun phrases. We always use this when we write descriptively. So I've got angry scarlet flames. So rather than saying flames came out of the top of the volcano, I've described them as being angry and scarlet. So we know what colour they are. And if they're angry, they're not just going to be flickering out, they're going to be flooding out of the volcano. Adverbs of manner give lots of impact. So here I've got forcefully, the water began to swell. The sentence there could be, the water began to swell, but when I say forcefully, it describes how the water is swelling. Then you're going to use your senses. So you're going to use your sight, your hearing, maybe your smell or taste, and maybe touch as well. Now that could be people who you are watching who are touching maybe the ash or each other, because your description is you watching this happening from the safety, of course, of the time machine. So something that can be seen, I've got high above a massive swirling cloud of ash. So that's the thing that can be seen. Something that can be heard, the thunder howling. Something that can be tasted or smelled. I've got smell here, the acrid stench lingering in the air. They're the gases that are escaping from the volcano. Something that can be touched. Here I've got the survivors held each other desperately. And the other thing that you need to try and get in if you can are feelings of the onlookers. So you need to get the idea of what it's like to actually be there. So I've got they watched in horror. If you can include all of those, or at least a majority of those, you are going to have an excellent descriptive piece of writing. In this example here, I've just shown you the different openers and range of openers that I've got, just to give you an idea of your piece of writing. So you can see time-wise passing. I've got then, suddenly, moments later, within seconds, and then soon to end it. But the high above is your place, and from nowhere is your place. Before our very eyes is your place as well. And then forcefully is your adverb of manner to open. Okay, you're going to watch another short video now of a volcano erupting, just to remind you what it looks like before you start your descriptive piece of writing. And then I'm going to help you a little bit with your planning with some vocabulary that you might choose to use. Okay, now that you've watched that video, hopefully you feel ready to start planning and beginning your writing. So, to help you with your planning, these are the stages of a volcano erupting. So the first thing that you are going to be talking about in your piece of descriptive writing is the earthquake that happens and the gas beginning to escape from the volcano. So you could talk about the ground shaking. You could talk about, like you've seen in the video, the cracks that appeared, the buildings falling down and crumbling. You're then going to talk about the steam and the ash venting. That means escaping out of the top of the volcano. Then the thunder and lightning and the dome collapsing. That's the top of the volcano beginning to break down. Then we're going to have explosions and the destruction of the town. And then you're going to talk about the ash, the lava, and more explosions, finally coming down and reaching the sea. You can choose to describe each of those, or you can miss them out. That's completely up to you. Okay, so some useful vocabulary. You might decide to use some of these pieces of vocabulary to describe the mountain of Mount Vesuvius. So some nouns that you might decide to use are summit, which is the top, the slope, the peak, again, which is the top, the rock face, boulder. You might have a boulder coming flying as part of the explosion. Adjectives that you might use: soaring, towering, ominous, deadly, lethal, perilous. So they all mean dangerous. And verbs that you might decide to use: thundered, ripped, cracked, shattered, swathed, shrouded. So they are verbs that you can use to describe the actions that are happening as the mountain perhaps rips apart as the volcano erupts. Some useful vocabulary here for the streams of lava that are flowing down. So you might, with your nouns, you might use current, rapids, fountain, fumes, chemicals. Adjectives: deep, wide, flickering, swollen, bulging, boiling, raging. And verbs: twisted, snaked, tumbled, spilled, bubbled, rampaged, gushed. All of those verbs describe the flow of the lava, the action. Okay, you might want to describe at the end what happens to the sea and the waves. So you might, for the nouns, use ocean, shore, swell, which is the movement of the water. Adjectives: inky, murky, restless, churning, foaming, boiling, brutal. And verbs, oh, I've got merciless there as well. Verbs that you might want to use: swirled, heaved, dragged, tumbled, lurched, surged, battered, and pummeled. So you might decide some of those verbs are useful for you for describing the sea and the waves. Okay. Next, for describing the town. So you might describe the streets or the alleys or the square or the centre. You might decide that it's crowded with people, or that areas are deserted as people try and run away. Polluted, that's the air in the town could be polluted now. The town's crumbling, ruined. Verbs that you might decide to use: sprawled, nestled, shadowed, covered, blackened, and bustled. Useful vocabulary for the thunder and the lightning. So you could, for the nouns, use echo, heavens, horizon, spear, blade. Adjectives that you might decide to use: torn, jagged, menacing, ominous. And verbs: rumbled, crashed, howled, boomed, tore, streaked, flooded. For your adverbs of manner, I've given you some examples here. If you are describing the volcano, the lava, the gases that are coming out as being angry, you might use fiercely, furiously, aggressively, violently, ferociously, brutally. If you want to describe the eruption as being evil, again, brutally, ruthlessly, malevolently, sinisterly. And if you want to talk about the people or yourself being scared and frightened watching this terrible event taking place in front of your eyes, you might use urgently, frantically, hysterically, shakily, helplessly. What you can do is you could go back to the video and just pause it so that you've got the vocabulary there. If you think, oh, I'd like to use that word, or what word could I use to describe Mount Vesuvius, the actual mountain, then you can go back and choose what you'd like to use. You can use my example text. It's going to be on the website, so you can have a look at that and you can pinch parts of my sentences. That's no problem at all. Have a go. Enjoy describing the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, and I'll look forward to seeing your work.